בסדר, 4, 3, 2, 1. נראה תשובה.
Fact. I think this is the 7th interception by David Sling. Tells us a lot about the ability and the importance of this system.
We're proud to be a part of the team, and I can't tell you how excited I am.
Welcome to the fourth session of the International Air Defense webinar series. My name is Nir Barenhart, and I will be the mediator of this session. It is RAFAEL's honor to host our valued followers and newcomers from a wild world air defense community. In today's session, we will be hosting 3 worldwide military and strategy senior experts, followed by a Q&A panel with questions from you, our audience. Please use the chat to send us questions at any time. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce our first speaker, Brigadier General Reserved Professor Yaakov Nagel. Professor Yaakov Nagel is currently a visiting professor at the Technion Haifa, Aerospace Engineering Faculty, and a senior fellow at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies. Nagel served as the head of the National Security Council and as the PM National Security Advisor acting from January 2016 till May 2017. He led the negotiations with the US on the new MOU and signed on November 2016. He also led the Israeli expert team working with the negotiation teams of the superpowers on the Iran nuclear program. Nagel served in various positions at the Ministry of Defense, Directorate of Defense Research and Development, including acting head of the military R&D from January 2002 until February 2004. He headed the Nagel committee that recommended Iron Dome as the Israeli BMD short-range system. Sir, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm really happy being here, talking on a subject that it's really, in the beginning I was surprised to talk together on active defense and the relations between active defense and the war between wars, but I want to talk really open 25 minutes about Israel's future challenges, the war between wars, of course, one of the big challenges, and how it influenced the IDF force buildup, the Israel national security strategy, and of course, the Israel air defense structure. I'll try to squeeze 2 hours presentation to 25 minutes. Now, when we talk about the war between wars, some people call it the gray zone war, and the very famous phrase, civis pacem parabellum, meaning if you want peace, prepare for war. And the war between war, some people don't understand, and you can see here some pictures of what is the meaning of war between wars, but there are still some countries that don't understand that we are in a continuous war that is being waged against their country. This is, for example, some very famous, important people from the US talking after the eliminations of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds forces, and some of them, Martin Indyk and Tucker Carlson, say it looks like we were on the brink here. We almost came to a war. Cliff May from FDD, the organization I'm working with, he say, look, you are not even grasp the reality. We are in a continuous war, and this elimination of some kind of a person is part of the war. Now, we used to say about the Israel national security strategy from Jabotinsky via Ben-Gurion to Netanyahu. We started in 1923, the only one that is really official and passed the cabinet parliament is in Ben Gurion, because probably then he had a majority of 61 members. In our current situation, political, no way to pass a national security strategy, but Netanyahu wrote one. I was privileged to be there when it started, not when it finished, 2016, 17, 2018. And I built my first part of the presentation on main things out of this national security strategy, but I wanted to bold out in red and in bold letters the war between war, the connection to the air defense, and how it's influenced the way we are building our force. And of course, coalitions between us and other very friendly countries around us and all over the world. Look, when we talk about main threat intelligence, and again, I'm not going to go all of it, only the ones that are bolded, we are going to have our enemies, we hope in 100 years, but we have to make sure it won't be in 2 or 3 years. We are going to have them armed with nuclear arsenal. We are countering PGM, the precise guided munitions, that against them we do a lot of things, and one of them is air defense, or Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, and we have cyber challenges. Again, they are all over the field, all over the world. The cyber challenge is there, again, part of the challenges against the air defense, and of course we have a constant threat on our home front. Now, what I'm showing you here are bullets from the Israeli National Security Strategy. I didn't write them for this presentation. I took them and I'm just bringing out those that are war between war and active defense connected. Our force build-up main principles is meaning, again, we are developing superior technology. We are building passive and active protection system, meaning also cement, but active protections like you see on the right side, the Iron Dome. We have our burial or advanced and total, at the end, barrier technology. We have we need to have to keep the continuity of operation by protecting Israel military and critical infrastructure. And again, air defense is one of the main assets that we can do. This protection, we will maintain superior cyber capabilities, so no one will try to, they will try always. We have hundreds of thousands of attacks every day. Since I started this presentation until now, probably 50,000 cyber attacks on the state of Israel. Most of them, or 99.9, it's not enough, are being detected and protected. Now, when I'm talking about the gray zone, the war between war, what are the examples? And again, the only two, because people don't understand that economic terror is also war between war, and organized crime is also war between wars. I'm talking about cyber and soft tools like social media. This is part of the war between the wars, or the gray zone war, and missiles and drones. Some people will put them in war, some people will put them in war between wars, because sometimes you can deny that, I don't know who sent this drone. This, I'm not going through all of it, just to show that Israel is friends of everyone. So you can see in about 4 months, when I was the National Security Advisor, we met Putin, Xi, and Trump. But if you look on the tensions between the superpowers, leading sometimes to war between war, and sometimes to the need of coalition between Israel and the countries that are like-minded like us, together. Just see between US and Russia, about Syria and Lebanon that I will come in a second. Arms control agreements, ballistic missile defense, putting ballistic missile defense system on Poland or other places in the world. North Korea, cyber, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, you just mentioned it. The same between US and China and US and Europe. All of them are tensions that are leading to sometimes the needs between the superpowers, and it's affected also the other countries around them. Now, I will just elaborate 5 minutes about the Israeli case. First of all, you know Israel is a small country, narrow, we don't have a strategic depth. People understand that borders, they have a lot of influence and meaning when you're talking about countering terror, but when you are countering missiles, especially long-range, even short-range missiles, borders have a less meaning, and we don't have a strategic depth, so we have to defend ourselves in a lot of other means because everyone understands. Now, I choose, of course, everyone that understands me knows that I cannot do a presentation without 5 minutes about Iran, so I'll talk a little bit, 5 minutes about Iran, their capabilities, and the dangers between them, and of course about Syria, Iran influence in Syria, and our new neighbor there, the Russians. Now, this is just one example of a paper out of the atomic archive that the Mossad retrieved from Tehran in an heroic, maybe in 100 years, it will be revealed from Tehran. Now, this is a page written in Farsi and translated for a country that don't want war, they don't build anything against anyone, only for protect themselves. It's written here, I am ordering you to design, produce, and test 5 warheads, each one of them 10 kiloton. It's meaning we're talking about 5 Hiroshimas, and integrate them on a missile. And this is a missile saying Israel must be wiped out of the earth. It's Hebrew and Arabic. Now, when you talk about 1 second about physics, when you talk about nuclear threat, someone asked me just a few minutes ago, you need fissile materials, you need weaponization, and you need means of delivery. All 3 of them we can find in Iran. The very faulty, horrible JCPOA that some people are talking about going back to it now, used to really dealt only with 1/3 of the fissile material. Nothing with almost nothing with the weaponization. 1 page that maybe I am responsible for part of it, that is not being even monitored, nothing about means of delivery, and a little bit of fissile materials. Now, just two slides, and I'm sure my friend Talin Bar is much better than me. He will talk about it. The Iranian military industry. See what they have about means of delivery. See the regional power projections. They are all around us. They are, and I believe them. When they say they are doing something, usually they are doing it. Going to Syria. In Syria, we have Israel had 3 red lines. And again, all of it implicates on why we're using the war between war and why we need very, very, very tough and decisive air protections against it. We have 3 red lines in Syria, 3 principles. No Iran or Hezbollah in Syria in any long-term arrangement. No transfer of advanced game-changing weapons, mostly PGMs, precise guided munitions, through Syria to Hezbollah in Lebanon, and no terror organization or terror threats on our borders. Usually, the war between war is here, of course, in Iran. Usually, when we take responsibility, I'm saying Israel, I am not an official role anymore. Now, as it was, and as our mediator said, I'm a professor at Technion, I'm working with FDD, I am consultant. But when I used to be for more than 40 years part of the government, when I say we, meaning if there is terror organization on our borders, we will retaliate and will take responsibility. When we see Iranians there, sometimes we are, and they are, for example, sending missiles against Israel, like happened a few months ago, 40 missiles, more than 35 of them landed in Syria, but some of them came to our borders, and of course, some of them intercepted by our air protection. It was then Iron Dome. What I'm saying, sometimes we are retaliating, sometimes we are attacking with no taking responsibility. When we're talking about transfer of things to Hezbollah, weapon of game-changing, most of the time it's a war between war. We are trying to be under the radar. Probably, most of the cases, everyone understands who did it, but no responsibility. The Russian involvement is very important. They have a very important role. Don't believe everything you read in the paper that they are doing things or not doing things. I am telling you that when we need, we have freedom of action in Lebanon and Syria. Of course, it's more difficult. So what? The IDF knows how to do its job. Now, I'm coming to the second half of my presentation. When we're talking about war between wars, the principle is that we have 3 stages of situation, in the classic war. We have routine, We have emergency and we have war. The war between war, or the gray zone, is a continuous set of actions. We are trying to keep it under the war level. So we are not in the war. So usually we're doing war between war in a routine or in an emergency. But we have to understand it's a war with everything that is like war, because we have to have an overall pre-planned force build-up and strategy. If you don't have it, you cannot exercise the war between wars. Now, when you do it, you have to make sure that you understand the other side, and you have to understand what the other side maybe will do to you. This is why you have to prepare yourself, building your air protection systems. You have to have the Iron Domes and the David Sling. You have to have the ability to really put them where you want them to be, very fast or constant if you have enough money to put them all the places. Usually you don't have it. You have to have enough missiles and replenishing them. You have to have everything ready, because if you are running a war between war, you have to understand it can be retaliated back even if it's under the war level. This is why when we're talking about how we are operating war between wars, we can have it, as I said before, open or declared, taking full responsibility. We can do it covered, meaning results are clear. No one and everyone that have sense understands who did it, but no one took the responsibilities, and it's a deniability space for both sides. And of course, you can do it secret, silence, nothing connected. Choosing the right method and exact timing, sometimes it's one of the most crucial things to have to do. And again, the principles, the capabilities, you have to have full offensive and defensive, as I said before. You have to run it, and you have to be ready to be on the defensive side if someone will retaliate against what you did, with all the things that you see on the stage now. Few words about cyber in the war between war. Look, everyone understands what is the physical layer of cyber. You know, you put cyber, you crash down the electricity, it's physical layer. Even the logical layer, you do things in computers, everyone understands. I want to emphasize the third one. Not too many people understand. It's called the semantic, or maybe the influence layer. You see on the right down on your screen, a very famous picture from the stock exchange in I think it was 2008-7, when there was a rumor. AP came out that there is a breaking news. There was explosion in the war in the White House. Obama is injured. In 1 second, boom, it went down, and then it was denied. If you knew it, you know you could do a lot of money. This is also cyber. And of course, you have to manage your risks. You have to keep the deniability space. You don't want to escalate when it's not there, but you have to have the Iron Dome and all the other systems that I'm sure my friends will talk about, and you have to have coalitions with your friends around you to work together, because you know you have to sometimes put your systems in Europe or in I don't know, in Asia or in South America, in other places, and around I don't know, in the Gulf. You have to work together in coalitions, especially when you talk about intelligence. There is a lot of budget constraints, manpower allocation, enemy learning curve, all those things you have to do when you do your risk management in this one. And there are, of course, I'm coming to the end of my presentations, there are a lot of tensions, challenges, and opportunities. When I'm talking about tensions, not cross the non-war line and the escalations into full scale unless you want it. You have to understand that the war between war is you have a lot of constant competition, budget, manpower, management attention, and interference with the force build-up for full-scale war, because if you put money in the war between war, you don't have enough money to put in the active protection, air defense, F-35s, and others. And of course, there is a possible effect of the enemy, but there are a lot of other players. So the challenges is the enemy is fast learning. You have to keep and use the surprise weapon for the full-scale war, not in the war between war, and it's a continuous debate and question you ask yourself. Use widely local forces, proxies, when you do coalitions and other ad hoc coalitions. And of course, you have to have a repetition capabilities. And I think the one before my last slide, you need to the opportunities. Deterrence, you have to have your enemy reduced capabilities to the next war using the war between war, take out some of his capabilities using the war between war, establish a new game rules, enhance your new operational capabilities, and of course, do a lot of research and development. And sometimes you can check your research of developments for the full war using the war between war. And sometimes you even can check your air defense systems. Sometimes you can retaliate. Someone will do something against you. Okay, I can check my air defense. I'm not saying this is the reason to use the war between war, but sometimes it helps you. And it, of course, can build international types and legitimacy. So I will finish with one small picture. And before I go to this picture, I'm telling you, don't plan your system this way. This is not the right way to plan. Even I'm going to show you something that succeeded. Don't plan your war between war, and don't plan your air defense like this. But to summarize what I said is, I try to take one angle that not too many people are talking with connections to air defense. That is the meaning of this webinar and this series of great presentations that RAFAEL is organizing. I am talking about war between war. It's a continuous war, it's a continuous threat, continuous force buildup, but it's also something that affects the buildup of your air defense if you want it or if you don't want it. So let's see how this one works, if it will work. Let's see. Okay. It's okay. Again, it's good for the Olympics, but it's not good for planning systems, even if it's very, very, very precise. I'm sure before this one succeeded, maybe some people lost their heads. So I'm not really recommending doing this in developing system. When I'm teaching in Technion system engineering, I'm telling them not to plan their systems based on trial and error like this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nagel. It was interesting hearing about your perspective of the air defense war between wars. It's definitely a new perspective for some of us. It is my honor to introduce our second speaker for today, Colonel retired David E. Shank. Colonel Shank is a U.S. Army veteran with over 30 years of senior executive-level leadership experience. The colonel commanded soldiers at every level from platoon to Army Air and Missile Defense Command in garrison and in combat. As his final assignment, David served in the U.S. Army Air Defense Artillery Commandant, responsible for the doctrine, organization, training, and leader development. David is a recognized expert in the U.S., European, and Israeli air and missile defense communities. He is an expert in strategic level planning, leader development, team building, program, and supply chain management. David possesses extensive global operation experience with over 35 nations in complex and dynamic environments. David has spoken around the globe at numerous conferences and symposiums on air and missile defense-related topics. He currently serves as the Senior Ground Force Representative and Senior Defense Analyst for Advanced Strategic Insight Incorporated. Sir, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Nir, and thank you for the introduction. It's tough to follow that Olympic-style cannonball into the swimming pool from General Gaull's video. But good day, everyone, and good morning from the United States of America. It's great to be here, and I'd like to first thank RAFAEL Advanced Defense Systems and the Air and Missile Defense Division for providing me the opportunity to share a few minutes and a few of my personal experiences and thoughts on the last 25 to 30 years of my Army career, having just ended this past February, and then how I see the future and the way forward for the U.S. Army today and into the next 10, 15, 20 years. I believe you can see my first slide. Most of these icons should look somewhat familiar. But what I'd like to do is talk about some of the revolutionary changes, and I'm sure we could all identify several others as well. But my point here is revolutionary. And starting with the top row, you've got Thomas Edison and the invention of the light bulb. You have the RCA chairman standing next to the first, one of the first color televisions from the 1950s. And then, of course, I'm sure we all recognize that top right photo of an iPhone developed in the mid-2000s, 2007, if I'm not mistaken. A little more closer to home, though, is the bottom row. And from a defense perspective, it provides the examples of weapons which changed the way wars were fought then and now across all three levels of war fighting: tactical, operational, and strategic level. In other words, it's a change in the character of war. You've got Dr. Gatling there with the Gatling gun, created in the 1860s. Bottom middle picture, Wilbur and Orville Wright in the early 1900s, and the introduction of the first flight and air power in general. And then, of course, more recently, the establishment of the unmanned platform, initially much larger than what you see on the screen. But what you do see here is one of the smaller Group 1 DJI Mavic drones. These were for sure game changers in the way we fought and continue to fight wars today and will fight in the future. What I'd like to do is just take a few minutes now to talk about some of the evolutionary changes that I experienced and observed during my 25 plus years as a U.S. Army Air Defense Artillery soldier over time, and then comment on some of the impacts and successes of some of these occasions without touching on each of these. The first is Desert Storm, 1990, 1991, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the Iraqi invasion into Kuwait, and what transpired following with a coalition. This provided the United States with the opportunity to introduce the Patriot weapon system and the recognition that it has since gained from that time frame. As some may know, the transition of the U.S. Army's involvement in Vietnam to the new doctrine known as air-land battle at the time, developed by, among others, Major General Don Starry. And this also helped develop and create the big five modern-day lethal weapons, one of which is the Patriot weapon system. The others were the Abrams tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle, the Apache, and Black Hawk airframes. From there, the drawdown upon completion of Desert Storm through 1995, partially also with regards to the Cold War ending, the U.S. Army decreased from 18 divisions to 12 divisions during that time, and currently today stands at 10 divisions. Again, one of the drivers was the end of the Cold War, and of course, cost to sustain possibly such a large ground force no longer required. The air defense artillery impacts here were great, ranging from short-range air defense, platoon-sized formations to formations the size of battalions within each of the divisions. Moving on to 2001, the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in the United States was a game changer. From an air defense perspective, SHORAD batteries then participated in each of the campaigns in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and within Iraq, air defense battalions as well. In addition, Patriot battalions deployed to the Gulf Cooperation Council states, as well as into Iraq during the ground fight, and then withdrew back to the Gulf Cooperation Council states. Air superiority was quickly achieved, and the need for short-range air defense capability ended. These formations were used then as base security requirements, transportation units, and detainee operations as just a few examples. Ultimately, counterinsurgency operations became the requirement for the duration of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And with that, the short-range air defense ADA drawdown, as I've termed it, began in 2003. In all, a total of 8 short-range air defense battalions were inactivated, leaving only 2 active component short-range air defense battalions and 7 short-range air defense battalion National Guard battalions. It is of note, and I'll go ahead and highlight what the National Guard has done with regards to the shortage of active component formations has been truly exemplary and noteworthy with missions in the National Capital Region, support to counter rocket artillery and mortar missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, which I'll talk a little bit more about, as well as support to the European theater. The drawdown decision was made on several factors, Army modularity being one of those, in which a need to build out a greater number of infantry and armored brigade combat teams from just over 30 brigade combat teams to an increase of 53. ADA, as you can imagine, was a bill payer for the force structure, along with other branches of the U.S. Army. This decision has impacted the current situation of short-range air defense, or lack thereof. And now, today, a generational gap exists in the knowledge, both technical and tactical, not only within the air defense artillery branch, but also across the United States Army and across the sister services. Just to highlight a few of the growth there during the COIN operations line, you see counter rocket artillery and mortars, really a success story here with regards to the expeditious development, the testing, the experimentation, and the deployment of its capability. As some may know, that land-based weapon system is normally a Navy weapon system on a maritime platform. Still exists to this day, and the science and engineering behind putting that capability on the back of a flatbed truck, testing, experimenting, and quickly deploying it to Iraq and ultimately Afghanistan was truly noteworthy. In addition, there you have a picture of a terminal high altitude air defense weapon system. The development of now up to a total of 8 batteries within the U.S. Army inventory, but bringing the capability to provide defensive fires against medium-range ballistic missiles was also noteworthy. And then lastly, there the creation of Patriot Battalions 14 and 15, which looking back, and it is extremely beneficial for those decision makers and what transpired based on the requirements that continue today in the Middle East. As we move forward into the modernization period, we've got a number of events that took place, and I had a pretty good front row seat for some of these. I did some time at the United States Central Command during the fight against ISIS as both the Integrated Air and Missile Defense Branch Chief, and then served as the Director of Operations Executive Officer and so had a front row seat of what the Islamic State desires and objectives were, and some of the crude and elementary use of drones, and how they were tactically used from their vantage point. It goes to show that less than $1,000 off commercial off-the-shelf products can very quickly become a player on the battlefield, and in some cases used to attack not only equipment but troops as well. We saw some of this also. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Russian incursion into Ukraine and the use of unmanned platforms and artillery systems, really combined arms actions against the Ukrainian forces, the full motion video capability, and the ability to provide GPS coordinates in a timely fashion, conduct artillery strikes was somewhat, from a Russian perspective, a outstanding event on their part. So it demonstrated the need again to relook defense against unmanned platform capabilities. And so during the modernization period here, I have highlighted on the slide, there were a number of events that took place. And most of this time was when I served as the 10th Army Air and Missile Defense Commander in the European theater. A couple just highlights. You have the Stinger team there on the slide, non-dedicated air defense artillery soldiers. So what do I mean by that? Infantry, armor, logistics, and these were soldiers as directed from then Army Chief of Staff, General Milley, the program to train up non-dedicated air defense artillery soldiers. So brigade combat teams, division headquarters, and other echelons would have at least somewhat of a capability against any type of air threat, specifically a unmanned aerial vehicle. It's still ongoing to the time up until I retired. The activation of the 1st Short Range Air Defense Battalion. So again, there's that generational gap that I spoke about earlier. So now there's a need for short range air defense. And so Europe was fortunate to receive the first active component, Short Range Air Defense Battalion, back into the formation, and will ultimately transition to the maneuver Short Range Air Defense Striker-based platform from the legacy Avenger systems. And then lastly there, we've got another photo of a THAAD launcher system. And what's important here is the dynamic force employment was a concept identified by then Secretary of Defense General Retired Mattis. In this case, this THAAD battery conducted a very short notice deployment to the state of Israel, and demonstrating that the agility to move tailorable and scalable forces around the world at a moment's notice. Again, in this case, the THAAD battery into Israel. And then lastly, as the serving as the 88 Commandant, and as mentioned in the bio that was read off, focused on doctrine, organization, training, and leadership. A push by senior leaders to move the air defense artillery into the protection warfighting function. My arguments, I stood strong with my argument to remain in fires, because that is what air defense artillery does, is provide defensive fires. And so that was a challenge, along with the continuation, as I mentioned, of the non-dedicated Stinger program. And then, of course, from my foxhole, a push for greater integration of international liaison officers and students within the schoolhouse. One last point to make, as the 88 Commandant, they also have responsibility over the test formation at White Sands Missile Range. And at that location, we have the Integrated Air and Missile Defense Battlefield Command System testing and experimentation ongoing. And of course, most recently, the U.S. Army procurement of 2 Iron Dome batteries, and that testing continues. So my last slide, in the next 5 minutes, I just wanted to highlight what I see as the way ahead. And I've attempted to list just some of the buzzwords that we're familiar with, that we continue to hear and used by senior political and military leaders. But again, these are my thoughts, and just to briefly share with you. The first is a network architecture. You've got to have a secure network architecture, and it's got to be not only service specific, but it's got to be joint, and it's got to be multinational, and it needs to be in place now. Before I left Europe, I had a great conversation with the USAFE Commander, General Haribian, and we attributed it to a light switch, where you go into an exercise, you use this network architecture, and then you put it into a warm status. So you literally turn the light switch off, so to speak. And so you've got to have a secure multinational network. Secondly, the command and control. And this is about decision-making. It's about collaboration at all levels and leveraging scientific capabilities and engineering capabilities through artificial intelligence, machine learning, machine-to-machine, passing of information, and potentially even recommending targets. Bottom line, it's how to get inside the adversary decision-making cycle and really getting, again, you've heard the old term, left of launch. Number 3 is information dominance, leveraging the science and the tools, platforms, and systems that are currently being created. And just this week, U.S. Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who chairs the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, reiterated his 4 functional battles, one of which is information advantage. Number 4 is all domain. Simply, we all recognize, we recognize all domains today, but the traditional air, land, and sea, and of course now you have cyber and space. You must consider also information electronic warfare. As General Nagall stated, he termed it gray zone, war between wars. I call it the competition phase, and it's the same. It's ongoing now. And then lastly is speed. And it's about decision superiority. It's speed of information, for example, the cloud as an example, speed of intelligence, speed of decision-making, and even speed of acquisition. Speed will win future battles. In closing, I'd just like to say considerations for the air and missile defense community must center on the how, as in how do future AMD systems provide defensive fires in view of these categories, the integration, so to speak. The what, as in what kinetic and non-kinetic air and missile defense capabilities are required across all domains. And the when, as in speed of recognition, speed of testing, speed of experimentation, and speed of acquisition. So what are the challenges the air and missile defense community will face tomorrow, 5, 10 years from now? Well, if we look at today's threat weapons being tested and experimented, then my response would be hypervelocity weapons. It would be space-based warfighting, and it would be artificial intelligence and unmanned systems, robotics. But I'd submit that the competition phase continues with non-kinetic strikes in the form of cyber attacks, a greater number of nations racing to achieve a space footprint, and an information warfare campaign designed to confuse and potentially impact the way people around the globe perceive things. And again, just referencing the General Nagall's brief, he used the term influence. Adversaries, state and non-state actors, as well as proxies, will continue to evolve capabilities and opportunities through technological developments and elementary or crude experimentation to benefit their objectives and desires. Therefore, it remains vital that testing, experimentation, and ultimately the acquisition process must change in order to maintain pace with adversaries. I'd like to once again thank Raphael and the support staff who helped me put this together, and for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to your questions during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Schenk. You have shared very interesting ideas with the group, and I do agree as an air defender that speed supremacy is one of the most important things that we need to look to. Our viewers, we invite you to raise questions using our chat. We will do our best to answer them during the panel session at the end. It is an honor to present our third speaker, Mr. Tal Inbar. Mr. Inbar follows the space and missile programs of Israel for almost 30 years and has written numerous articles and op-eds in national and international media. He is a visiting speaker at various think tanks and research institutes, including RAND, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, and Secure World Foundation. Inbar delivered congressional briefings to U.S. senators and representatives on ballistic missile programs of Iran and North Korea. Inbar is studying the use of drones and UAV systems, missiles and cruise missiles in the Middle East, Iran and China programs and the threat they pose. Sir, the stage is yours.
Thank you for the invitation and for the webinar itself. It's an honor to be here. Well, we have a lot of issues to discuss, and my previous colleagues spoke about some of them. I want to emphasize some of the challenges that are now in the face of Israel, and not only Israel, but as an Israeli, I will start with our neighborhood. We have a constant increase in the quantity of ballistic threats. The accuracy is improving all the time, and the lethality of the threats is also improving. Also, we can touch a little bit on the emerging threats of hypersonic missiles. And we see the first operational missiles in that regard in China and Russia. And what we saw recently, we knew it for a long time, but we saw it recently in the Operation Guardian of the Walls, the indigenous manufacturing of rockets by terrorist organizations and non-state entities. And speaking about salvos and challenge of quantity, we saw this amazing picture from the recent Operation Guardian of the Walls, and you can see on the right side dozens of incoming rockets, and on the left side you can see this is of course long exposure, but you can see dozens of interceptors from the Iron Dome system, and this is a challenge. This is a constant challenge, and the enemy knows that this is a challenge, and they are trying to find some vulnerabilities in the missile defense system that we have. So large salvo orchestrated from different azimuths and so on, this is just only one method of the other side to cope with active defense systems. So you can see again, and there are a lot of videos from this operation. And speaking about the self-sustained weapon industry in the Islamic Jihad in Gaza and Hamas, let's say the recent conflict, we saw most of the incoming rockets that were made in Gaza. Some by help of Iran. Iranian knowledge is spreading throughout Iraq and Yemen and also the Gaza Strip. So there is now almost an independent capability of manufacturing a lot more rockets than we saw in previous engagements. And also the lethality, meaning that the warheads are now getting larger and heavier, because every active defense system is not 100% hermetic. It cannot supply hermetic defense. So even the small leakage of heavy rocket could cause a lot of damage and casualties in our side.
Another international trend that we can now see for the first time, it was revealed just recently, is the question of accuracy. So kits for conversion of statistical rockets into a very accurate weapon system is now throughout the world, we can see from different countries. And this is the latest addition from Iran. It was shown just recently in a weapon exhibition in Tehran. And this is a kit, a small kit with GNSS alongside with INS, and it could cause a lot of damage. And of course, if you have such a capability, you can try to target, for example, the radars of the active defense systems. So this is a real threat. And another challenge for any missile defense system in the world. And we can see in the international markets such kits from Turkey to Russia, from China and Iran to North Korea. And there are a lot more to come in the foreseeable future. So every active defense should consider the accuracy. It's not a revolution, it's an evolution of the threat as a major challenge, or one of the major challenges lying ahead. And it is not just about rockets, because we can see from Iran, for example. I'm studying Iran for decades, but I can see from just recent military drills and exercises in Iran, we can see that even the longest range ballistic missiles, this is the Hoam-Shar, which is an Iranian version of a North Korean missile, for a range of more than 2,000 kilometers. But you can see the actual hitting of the re-entry vehicle during an exercise. So this is something that we can see from rockets to short-range missiles to longer-range missiles in Iran. So you, as the aggressor possessed such capability, there is no need for massive attacks of dozens or hundreds of munitions. You can cause a lot of damage by using just a few. And another example from the local neighborhood, we can see on the lower right side, we can see Hamas militias loading heavy rockets, and we can see some rockets from Syria and some from military militia from Iraq. So non-state players now have the capability of produce their own weapon systems, rockets, and even accurate rockets as well. And speaking about the proliferation of knowledge, of the technical know-how, how to build such a weapon system, how to convert statistical rocket into an accurate rocket, almost a ballistic missile, those are just small examples from original Iranian designs that are spreading to Iraq and Syria, Lebanon, and the Gaza Strip. Actually, there are some video clips that Iran is producing just as technical instructions for militias all around the world, how to build their own rocket and missile capabilities. And we, of course, are aware about the huge amount of missiles in Yemen and the operational use in Yemen against Saudi Arabia, for example, and we saw the lack of proper missile defense in several attacks on the Aramco installations in Abqaiq and in other places throughout Saudi Arabia, and of course attacks against the airport and so on. And I am not familiar with the long heritage of Yemenite engineering and aerospace industries. So of course now we know that those weapons are coming from Iran. There is a special, let's say, special design, a special batch of munitions that Iran is producing, especially for exports to such countries like Yemen, to the Houthi regime, and so on. I mentioned the hypersonic threat. So one could ask himself, is a hypersonic weapon is a paradigm shift in the world of offensive systems or just a buzzword? So I think it's not a buzzword, but we now see only the beginning of operational systems. In Russia, it's a strategic weapon system designed to hit the continental United States, for example. And in China, we can see something like a theater system, the Dongfeng 17. And it is unpredictable because such weapons are not continue their way and path from the launch point to the target with a ballistic trajectory. So you cannot predict. It's hard to detect. So there is a sensor issue as well as the interception issue. Usually we are speaking about munitions and missiles with speeds over Mach 5. So if you consider only the speed, so even Iran has such a missile in its inventory, but usually we are speaking about something like a glider, for example. We can also discuss the issue of hypersonic cruise missiles, but this we'll discuss not in today's webinar. But just to give you something to look on, you can see a general representation of a ballistic trajectory against something like a glide with speeds up to Mach 10. So you can just skip the atmosphere and increase the range and maneuver dramatically not all, in various axes. So it's first, the target could be a much larger area that you can aim to, and it is a major challenge to track, detect, and of course engage. So now we can see that in the United States, for example, there is almost an emergency plan to deal with such threats from other countries. And we saw for the first time several years ago the Dongfeng 17, which is a glider, hypersonic glider from China, but the range is quite limited, and it could be used against ships, for example, or hardened points like command posts and so on. And we saw the Avangard system, which is an HEV, a hypersonic glide vehicle from Russia. This is something with an intercontinental range. And those are, by the way, official drawings from a presentation by the Russian Ministry of Defense. And you can see how this type of weapon is dealing with Aegis ships and so on. So the idea is to make the life of missile defense much harder and challenging. There is another corner of the world with DPRK, or like we used to call it North Korea. And in North Korea, there is the question of intercontinental ballistic missiles. They have the capability, proven capability, from at least July 4, 2017. North Korea is capable of hitting the United States with an ICBM carrying a nuclear weapon, and they have nuclear warheads for those missiles. In the theater arena, in the shorter range, we can see a huge array of sophisticated, very accurate missiles with some penetration capabilities of hard targets, and all are solid propelled against the intercontinental ballistic missile, which North Korea is still producing them with liquid propulsion. There is a question of putting some limitation on like arms control, ITAR, MTCR, export control, and so on. And I can say, I'm not happy to say it, but it just won't work. And there is a lot of technical know-how already in the hands of terrorist groups and non-state entities all over the world. And actually, by legal actions, we cannot stop the proliferation of missiles and rockets. the limitation and the legal framework for them is always working with the good guys. With the bad guys, they are not complying with any laws. They are firing rockets against civilians. So international regulation is something that cannot be something that could stop them. And there are a lot of more threats over the horizon, and some of them are already operational, not only in the Middle East, but in other countries as well. We can speak about cruise missiles, UCAVs, suicide drones, and of course the whole theater of naval threats and so on. But this gives me something to speak about in future events. So just to let you see something, this is a collage of various weapons from Yemen to Iran. And you can see something like a stealthy UAV from Iran and non-line of sight, short-range missile from Iran also, and some UAVs from Yemen that are operational and used against the targets in Saudi Arabia. And you can see also the Quds cruise missile, which is a version of another missile, cruise missile from Iran. So we are not only speaking about very high-speed targets, but also slow targets, which possess their own set of challenges for missile defense. So to be continued in the future, and thank you very much for the attention. And I give the floor back to you.
Thank you, Tal. Stay with us for the last part of today's, which is the Q&A session. Dear guests and speakers, it's now time for our respected speakers panel to answer some of the questions raised during today's webinar. The first question goes to Professor Nagel. You explained some connection between the war between wars, cyber, air defense, and more. It looks like the world is going to diverse threats that are all connected. How do you recommend to prepare in order to be ready for the next?
First of all, the guy that really asked this question looks like he listened to my presentation. I talked a little bit about it in my talk. Now, the world is changing on us, but it's not the only place that is changing, and this is the nice thing and the happy things and the not happy, but it's good for the defense companies because they always have new challenges, new customers, and new systems. You need to do your systems, and I will talk a little bit about the hypersonic because I 80% agree with my good friend Tal. I think it's not a buzzword, but I use this one because of the versatility. I think it's not. I think it's not a buzzword, but it's not a phenomenon. And again, I don't agree that there are operational systems in China and Russia. They are saying they have systems. Maybe in China there are. I think the Russian one is very far from being operational. It's like saying that we have a good intercepting laser system in Israel. In the good way, and I hope it will be in the tactical area, we have something that is 5 years from being operational. So I'm not sure that hypersonic, but I'm talking, I think hypersonic will come to this arena. Until then, we have enough time to prepare solutions. The same as what I talked before against war between war against us, against retaliation, against, look, it's also drones and balloons. It's also, you need sometimes air defense. So you have to have versatile systems. You have to have redundancy. You have to have the ability or the capability to have very, very fast deployment. Your system should be able or capable to deal with certain variety of threats. All weather, you have to make sure that you can work in a coalition. If you are a defense company, you have to work with a coalition of defense industries. Sometimes you have the best interceptors, they have the best launcher, the other guy have the best I-square and or the best radar because they don't want you to use your one. You have to have all these coalitions talking together, sometimes coalitions of subsystems, sometimes coalitions of systems, and of course you have to counter and on the last sentence, because I know that we have to have short answers, you have to make sure that you are not jumping above your belly, as we say in Hebrew, because otherwise your budgets can be finished very fast. And I'm sure on lasers, on space, on airborne systems, we'll have time to talk on one of the other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nagel. Next question that we have is for you, Tal. Is the hypersonic weapons a real threat or a buzzword?
Well, as Jacob already said, it is a real weapon for the foreseeable future, if not for today. And I can just say that a hypersonic threat is not a wonder weapon with no answer. So, of course, you have to adapt. You have to learn how to detect them. You have to produce something which will be much more faster interceptor, for example. But you can address the problem. And the problem is now on the table. Maybe not in the battlefield today, but in 5 years, of course. And there will be a proliferation of hypersonic weapons in the future.
Thank you so much. Next question that we have is for Colonel Davidchenk. As a retired U.S. Army officer, what challenges or adjustment would you recommend to the military service chiefs?
Well, I'd having served as a double MDC commander as well as the ADA commandant for a training and doctrine command, I'd probably sum it up in 3 points. One, as a theater enabler at the Army Air Missile Defense Command. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You know, the United States Army and the United States of America in general, I don't think would ever go at it alone. And therefore, my second point is we've got to train, and we've got to train not just across the joint services, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, et cetera, as well as the whole of government. But we've got to do it in a multinational way. So we've got to have greater integration, and we're definitely moving in that direction. And then lastly, as I highlighted, speed. We've got to get after the acquisition process. It's got to be faster, and no weapon is perfect. We saw that with the counter-rocket artillery and mortar system that was created in about a 12 to 15 month process back in 2005 and 2006, based on enemy capability. And so again, that was a success story. And I think just getting after the acquisition process and getting capability in the hands of the warfighters is my third point.
Thank you so much. We have another question from our viewers for you, Professor Nagel. What are some of the near future challenges of missile defense around the world?
Again, first of all, I'm not countering my assumption. Hypersonic will be a challenge, but we'll have also challenges from the lower level of the tactics. I remember when I was the National Security Advisor, and I asked people from the Air Force to tell me what they are doing against drones, no problem, drones is something, forget about it, we, the Air Force, we can, and I'm talking only about 2014. Something like this, 6 years ago. Now they have a special group working only on this. So we have from the down level up to the upper level, but we have to make sure that very, very careful. Again, it's good for the defense industries. It's not good for the governments. Don't spill over billions of things that already happen. The world is a circle. Before you start something, look 20, 40, 60 years ago. Now, sometimes we didn't do it 60 years ago because we didn't have technology. Today we have. I don't believe, again, space, it's okay, maybe. I don't think, I hope not, because starting wars from space or in space, the world will change totally. It's not good for the superpowers, so I think they won't do it. Don't think about, the new thing that 40 years ago, we spent hundreds of millions, BPI, best boost phase Israel. No way. And I was one sentence. There are challenges. I belong to those that have scratches from this, and I don't think it will work. Again, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think so. If you will build your air defense on things that are in the air, I'm not talking about intelligence goes up, that you need to protect 24/7, 365. When you need them, they won't be in the air. So don't build your air defense on things that are based only or solely things that are in the air. If we could put them some there, up there for 365, 24/7, no problem. We don't have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Tal, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, just a little bit. I think that all the missile defense systems should be much more resilient to cyber attacks, for example, and from drone attacks. Just imagine a very small drone, or it could be a suicide terrorist just driving into such a battery. So one way of dealing with it is, of course, to decentralize the whole system and to have more radars, more assets that you can put in some ways that are much more defendable.
I understand. Another question for you that came from the audience. Do you think that Israel can cope with North and South attacks, considering the huge quantities of ballistic threats that they have?
I do, but it will be expensive. It will require the procurement of a lot more interceptors, more batteries. And of course, defense is just one part of the equation. The other is, of course, offense. So we cannot allow in the next conflict, if it will be from two arenas at the same time, it must be very short. So the method of shortening the time of the conflict is, of course, by means of offense much more than the defense.
Thank you. Professor Nagel, how Israel evaluated the war between wars? What is the part it takes in Israel force buildup, and especially in effects on air defense?
Again, if I have to summarize my presentation, this is exactly the question. Because I couldn't ask a better one. Now, look, the war between war, it's a very important man. It's not a side playground or something that someone is doing in his office. Maybe it started, I think, almost 10 years ago, as something that is addition to something. No, it's part of our strategy. It's part of the continuous war that we have between us and our neighbors, close and far away. We have to build our force to it. We have to spend money on it. We have to build strategies in order to run it. And we have to make sure, even so we are talking, even things that I said today and everything I say today is unclassified like all the others, maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I couldn't say. So today everyone knows that there is a war between war, gray zone war, but there are a lot of things inside the war between war that should remain under the radar, in the deniability area. Don't take the risks. Do it when you need. Don't talk on it when you don't need to talk on it. Sometimes you have to talk on it because part of the war between war, as if you remember from my presentation, is a deterrence. Deterrence you sometimes get from doing, sometimes getting from talking. If you talk on something you cannot do, there is no deterrence. If you talk, obviously. If you do, and sometimes talk about it, sometimes it's okay. And of course, the war between war affects on air defense, because you have to make sure that you are ready, as Tal said, resilient. You have to really deploy your systems in Israel or for other countries like the United States, like others that are working with us, to protect your forces very fast, very, I call it has to be very simple and simple to connect to the local forces and to international coalitions that you have around you. This is very important in the air defense based on the war between war. And the most important, be always ready. Just imagine what could happen if, when someone, as mentioned before, attacking in Saudi or in Iraq or in some other places, the Americans have, I don't know, 5 Iron Domes. Or David Link. Just imagine what could happen if you intercept everything, or 95%.
I think they would be happy.
I think so, and if they will deploy it, they will be happy. I can say so.
Our next question is for Colonel David Shank. Sir, can you talk about some of the differences between leading soldiers at the platoon battery command levels versus leading soldiers at the Army and Air and Missile Defense command levels?
Sure. As a platoon or battery commander, serving in the Army is fun. I mean, it really is. You're directly engaging soldiers at the ground use level, and it's exciting. It's a tactical level fight, so to speak, and it's extremely enjoyable, and it's a learning point. It's a preparatory setting for the next echelon to serve in. As you get beyond battalion level command and onto either both brigade and or Army Air Missile Defense Command, now while you're still fighting the tactical requirements, you're definitely involved in the operational and strategic levels of warfighting. Again, using the example as an Army Air Missile Defense Commander, as a theater enabler in Europe, I answered directly to General Scaparrotti and then ultimately General Walters, though I was assigned to U.S. Army Europe, Lieutenant General Hodges, and then eventually General Pavoli. So at that level, as a theater enabler, it's very strategic. It's extremely joint. It's very multinational, and the requirements are greater, and you're further removed from that ground roots, so to speak, serving alongside soldiers at that level.
Thank you for your answer. We got a fresh question for you again, Colonel Shank. Cooperation between industries is most of the time hampered by non-disclosure policy of the government. How can this be solved?
Well, I'm not a policy guy, but before I took the uniform off, if I may, I always encouraged, and I still encourage, as a civilian now, as a retiree. I always encourage, and I encourage now, the industry that you talk to the service members, and you roll up your sleeves and you get down at that tactical level that I just mentioned, and you talk to young soldiers and young service members. I mean, these are the young people are the ones who grew up with computers, who do not know what a beeper is, or a pager, or not having a remote control to a TV. They clearly understand gaming. They understand computers. And when you compare, and I'll use myself as an example, there's no doubt young soldiers are much more intellectual today than I was when I was their age. It's based on the technology that they grew up with. When it comes to disclosure, again, not a policy guy, but having frank conversations with military formations, industry working together in an effort to better the equipment and get it into the hands of the warfighters quicker and more expedited. I think it would be the focus for me.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question coming from the audience. We got another fresh one for you, Tal. There's a question asking your thoughts for the directed energy defensive solutions. What does that come into in the future?
Well, I think for the last 20 years, I'm saying that laser is the weapon of the future, and the future is not here yet.
And it will remain like this forever.
I don't
is
know.
what we say.
Maybe on the tactical level it won't.
No, I'm joking. Yes.
Yeah, but we, of course, the advantage and the capability of such a weapon is known for years. But there are also not only technical obstacles, but physical limitations, and you won't see anywhere in the world active defense that is relying solely on directed energy. It will be a complementary part, and we can see it already in the US Navy, for example. But as such a complementary weapon system, it will be great, I think better on the tactical level.
But there you stand with that.
If I can add, I agree totally. You know, the joke that Tal said, the one I heard is that laser is the future of it's the weapon of the future, and it will remain like this forever. I don't think so. If you read, now it's not, I think, classified, the last page of the Nagel committee that recommended Iron Dome 2007 said that we need to continue working not on the chemical laser solution, the big one that will never work. We have to work on the solid state laser, mostly on the tactical level, and we thought and we predicted that in 2019 there will be something working in a tactical level around 100 kilowatts. We predicted it because our friends from the United States told us what they are doing, what they have. We didn't think that at the end the breakthrough will be in an Israeli company that have a breakthrough in the tactical level. So adding directed energy to a system is very good. So an Iron Dome with Tamir interceptors and with beam 1, 2 of laser that can save some of these missiles for threats that can be dealt with these missiles, yes, it's good. It's a tactical level. A tactical level for the field, no problem. A laser on a drone or a UAV for a tactical area of a, I don't know, battalion, platoon, it's okay. I don't believe in megawatts lasers. I believe it's been done, but on a jumbo, the very famous ABL or SBL, you spend billions of dollars, you can do it. The technology will be here. Even if it will be so expensive to develop and to maintain and to operate it. 1 hour of operation was there, I think, $500,000. Okay? 1 hour, and I'm not talking about its operation, not LCC. So lasers should be part of the solutions. Directed energy should be. There are a lot of other directed energy solutions, some of them maybe in the future. It cannot be sole, it cannot be alone, and it cannot be solving the real long range. And especially some people say, no, okay, now we are going back to directed energy laser because of the hypersonic. Just imagine how much time you need to stay from what distance on the target to hit it, and what you can do inside the target, outside it, to protect it against lasers that you cannot do against kinetic. And the biggest lie about lasers, it's the best for salvos. The salvo that Tal showed. Look,
it's the worst for salvos.
It's the worst. Why?
We agree.
Because kinetic, if I have enough power in the radar, I can send 100 against 100. I don't know. The number in lasers is 1. After you finish, before you finish your mission, you cannot go to the other one. So someone told me, okay, you will have 100 beams. Okay, then it will be much more expensive. So it's the worst solution for salvos. I'm not talking about whether it's the worst solution for salvos. This is why it will be tactical as an addition to another system.
And of course, it's a very good way of dealing with UAVs.
Maybe with UAVs, others with balloons.
Sure.
It can be in the tactical area. It won't deal with the 3,000 kilometers really big missile with a ton of course, or a nuclear missile. Sure. No way, this is not lasers.
I think we all agree on that.
Not all agree, this is the problem. I agree, all here. I'm
I
not
want to ask
the,
Colonel
the,
Schenk
wo-
what he
the
thinks
world is
about
not
it.
agreeing.
Yeah.
Colonel Schenk, can you share your thoughts about it?
Sure. No, great points by both of my esteemed colleagues. And I agree with one of the last comments about laser use at the tactical level. I think it could fit within a layered defense system. Lower tier, short range air defense, lower tier, upper tier, and even space-based. I think there's a need definitely for lasers at the tactical level. And potentially the way forward is space-based. We shall see.
Okay, thank you. And now to close our session, panelists, we would like to have your final thoughts or emphasis for the audience. Tal?
Well, first, we are living in a complex neighborhood, and we can see a lot of new emerging threats. Like some of them we already talked about, and there will be probably more. So the challenge for every industry or a country that wants or needs to be protected against ballistic threats and UAVs and so on is to prepare for the unknown threats. I can talk a lot about emerging threats for, let's say, for the next 5 years or 10 years. But what is really be a challenge is to try to imagine the longer range and in the longer future threats. So your capabilities of defense should be agile and adapting, and this is not something that is easy.
I agree.
I think that if I have to summarize, again, not talking about being versatile, agile, all those things are very, very, very important. But it's good to be a defense industry that's working on air defense, because it will be always a challenge, and there will be always customers, because there will be always threats. You have to have all levels. Israel is the only one that has 3 levels and maybe more. I talked about the lasers, but we have to remember that always air defense is the defense, meaning the debate, the battle, that it's okay, it's legitimate, it will be between defense and offense. For example, in Israel Defense Forces, it was balanced here, it was balanced there. Now the chief of staff will say, I want to go back to the balance, more for the offense, less for the defense. It will be back and forth. At the end, it's 40-60, 50-50, 60-70, never mind. I urge again, I know that some people don't agree with me, defense, air defense systems, don't mix them with offense. Some people say, okay, we have air defense, we know where the threat's coming from, let's kill the original also. It's mixing 2 things together. If your computer should do coffee, probably it's not going to be a good computer. You can do it, but the questions are others: ethics, intelligence, closing circles, making sure that you are not eating innocents. If a missile comes against you, you can intercept it. Everyone understands it's a defense system. Don't mix between defense and offense system. It will be a mistake.
Thank you. Colonel Schenk, any last highlights before we close?
Sure, thank you. And many thanks again to RAFAEL's Air and Missile Defense Division today for allowing me to participate. Just 3 points. Non-kinetic fight. The competition phase, as I mentioned earlier, it's ongoing now by way of whether it's cyber events or information warfare. Both which were also mentioned by General McGall there. Number 2, the enemy gets a vote. Sounds somewhat cliche, but it's true. From my foxhole, I couldn't tell you where the next fight is going to be. I know what senior American political leaders believe and profess in the areas we're preparing. As an American military. and who we deem the great power competition. But again, the enemy gets a vote. And then lastly, going back to the other point I made, it's industry is a player in this game. The technology aspects to it, the constant modernizing of current legacy systems as well as future systems, and then the speed to equip the warfighters with equipment and then get them trained as quick as possible. It's a must to recognize that speed requirement while also keeping an eye on the almighty dollar and the budget and the cost associated with newer systems. And then how do you increase the longevity? How do you make a future system not only last longer, but make it interoperable, that it can be used with even future systems. So all things to consider. But again, thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you so much, and I would like to thank all our speakers today in our 4th webinar. It's been a pleasure hosting you, and coming from the audience, I hear they had a lot of questions, a lot of interest. We had a lot of viewers this time, and I want to thank our loyal viewers and newcomers and welcome you to join us on our next webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Have a great evening and morning, depending on where you are.
Thank you very much.